You were like an advertising junkie as a kid.
I wasn't. I was that was nepotism. I actually wanted to be.
Going to go through the litany of things that you're up to, but why don't you start and tell us all the things you have going on?
Presently or the past?
Well, about yourself. You've got all these different projects. You're at Avid Learning. You're curating the Royal Opera House. Tell everyone about yourself for those who don't know you.
Well, I moved back to India in the end of 2010, and ever since then, I've been working with a company called the SR Group. I started working with them on the brand and marketing side, which is my background. I used to be an old madman, and I just fell into the arts and culture by mistake. And I was asked to take over a small continuing ed program called Avid by Mrs. Madhuruya, who's the vice chairperson's wife. And when the boss's wife asks you to do something, you don't say no. But anyway, I've always loved the arts and culture. I've always been a consumer, never a practitioner. And so I started working on Avid Learning in about, I think, 2011. And I took it from a continuing ed platform and made it into an arts and culture platform. It's basically the cultural arm of the SR Group. And what I do is I do talks, workshops, panel discussions in the area of art, culture and heritage, innovation, literature. And I do so working with lots of partners and collaborators. The US Consulate in Mumbai has been one of my old collaborators also. And through this journey, I have curated various things, including the literature section at the Kala Ghoda Arts Festival. And in 2016, when the Royal Opera House reopened after 25 years, I was hired as a curator, and I've been privileged to do so. And I curated it until lockdown. I'm still curating and hoping our stage doors will open really soon. But simultaneously, through lockdown, we pivoted online like the rest of the world. And so I run something called Avid Online. We do about 240 programs a year, just small numbers like that. And we're just having fun. I mean, in October, we launched a children's book, which was something I was very, very passionate about. And it's to educate kids about coral conservation. It's themed after a woman, a female protagonist, Uma Mani, a 50-year-old lady who learned to swim and dive in her 50s. And that was something that resonated with me. I said, is a strong female role model for kids, and let's create a book.
I just read something about coral here in Mumbai.
Yeah.
Actually, out in the bay, that it's a pretty robust coral ecosystem.
Well, I really hope what you read is true. But the reason for the book was actually moving back a few years. I had gone to Australia, and somebody told me you have to watch Chasing Coral before you go there, and I did. And I mean, I just saw the devastation and the calcification of the coral reefs there. And cut to 2019, and I heard about this film made on this woman, and my mind straight went back to what I had seen. And her whole thing was also the calcification of corals in the Gulf of Mannar, which is, in the southern part of India. And I decided, I have a young kid, and I used to read to her a book written by Julia Donaldson called Tiddler, which is about underwater life. And I said, what a great way to educate kids about corals, then make a book on it and talk about this woman's journey. And so we created this book, and I'm going to do the book, and I managed to get HarperCollins to publish it. And we actually got kids to be part of it. So we workshopped it. We had 20 kids illustrate corals and coral women, and they've been included in this book.
That was sort of and I got us off track, but that was a long roundabout way to introduce yourself, because normally I would just say this is Asad Lalljee, but I look at this bio. It's like a full page of 14-point font, and I didn't want to sit here reading
they
over.
asked me for 2 versions. I gave them both versions.
Well, we want to give you your due respect, but you ever know how, like, at speeches when someone introduces you, it just goes on and on and on. So I'm glad you got to introduce you. But look, the reason you're here, we wanted to talk to you. You are interesting in that your U.S. journey started in Mumbai. You went to Xavier's,
That's right.
and then went to Emerson in Boston, in Massachusetts, which is an amazing college town. You got Emerson, Harvard, MIT, Boston College, Boston University, and on and on.
Northeastern, yeah.
Northeastern, yeah, another giant school. What sort of, if we can take a step back, put yourself back, you're at Xavier's here in Mumbai, and you're thinking about post-grad study. What made you decide to go to the U.S.?
So, when I was at Xavier's, I was not thinking of the U.S. I was thinking of, doing exams and applying for an MBA in India. And while I started doing that, studying for my exams, I started working. And I've been working since I was a kid, in my dad's office, which was advertising. And one of my dad's clients told me, "You belong on Madison Avenue." And this is circa 1991, right?
So Madison Avenue is the shorthand for where all the advertising
that's
agencies
right.
in the U.S. That's the advertising industry in the United
Exactly.
States.
They all used to be there. Unfortunately, not many are left on that street anymore. So I started. I thought, oh, I'm Madman, and this is before Madman existed. This is before Google existed. This is before the internet was used that widely. So I actually was fortunate enough to attend something called the Ad Club of Bombay. It's basically the largest advertising club in the world. And because my father had an agency, I was allowed to become a member at the age of 18. So I used to go for these talks. I think I've been a lifelong learner. I used to go for these talks like a little groupie, watch all these ads created by Leo Burnett, Chicago, and all these stalwarts of advertising used to come down. And they used to do these little mixers, and I used to go, wow, And I remember once there was this guy, Alec Padamsi, was the guru of advertising. He after one of the commercials, he says, even if we make commercials like that, where will we get the cars from, which was Mercedes-Benz. And now, lo and behold, we make those commercials and we also make those cars in India.
You were like an advertising junkie as a kid.
I wasn't. That was nepotism. I actually wanted to be, it's a little longer story. I actually wanted to be an architect. Because I've always been, creative. I used to draw, paint, act. I was never good at any of them to make it a career. And, 25, 30 years ago, arts wasn't a viable career option. Everyone thought you do the arts as a hobby, right? Yeah, you paint well. Okay, do well in math. That was the analogy. And at that point, the gender thing was also there, which was, boys don't do arts, right? You do commerce or science. Now, those definitions don't exist right anymore, thankfully. But so I always thought I used to build houses out of Lego, and my mother said, "You become an architect." I said, "Sure, I'll become an architect." Now the problem arose where I went to meet people for informational interviews, mentors. I wasn't inspired, and maybe I chose the two wrong people, and I cannot name them because they're very successful and very famous. They just didn't excite me. So I said, "Okay, what's the next best thing?" My father's business. So he never encouraged us to come. He said, "You got to go graduate, find your own path, and come if you have to."
Okay.
And with my tail between my legs, my brother and me, we both did the same thing. We went and joined our father, and we worked through college and stuff like that. And that's where I met one of my dad's clients, and he said, "You belong on Madison Avenue." So I said, "Okay, how do I get there?" Now, no one's going to hire me on Madison Avenue sitting here when I have 0 to none qualifications. So I said, I'm going to go study. And I was very, very, very sure I didn't want to do an MBA. I wanted to do a degree in advertising. And so I went to this wonderful institution, the USIS. Now I think they've added a foundation to the name at Churchgate. And, this is old school, right? So there were these books, like these binders, like this big binders. And I would plow through them, book after book. And
What are the binders, though?
They were all the catalogs of all the colleges.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
Yeah. This is before the internet,
no,
right?
I know. This is how you picked college.
I'm not sure whether I actually hand-wrote the addresses or they allowed us to photocopy it there.
Okay.
I think they may have been nice and allowed us to. And I wrote down 30 names of universities and salivated all over their catalogs, and I wrote to them. And I want to join your college. Basically, I wrote you to write for an application to be sent to you. And all of them sent an application back, obviously. And you do your little dog and pony show when you send that application, because I was going for grad school, not undergrad.
Right.
And but each of them wanted an application fee, which was like, at that point of time, I think it was $25 or something. But in
times 30.
Yeah, exactly. And so I wrote back letters to everyone saying that is my salary. Because really it was at that point, it was about 3,500 rupees, which, 30 years ago was a lot of money. Now, that times 30 universities, you just pay for the application, forget paying for your school.
Yeah.
So I managed to get application fee waivers from all colleges except UT Austin, which I actually did a pay for because I was kind of keen on that school. And I got into a couple of schools, but the money wasn't, they didn't give me financial aid because international student, all that fun stuff. So long story short, then I was, I think my parents bribed or tricked me into staying back because, the whole Indian mentality those days was, if he goes, he'll never come back. And, we can't let him go, and son goes, and, all that fun stuff. You got daddy's business, you jump in and run. And that wasn't my cup of tea. Anyway, so I worked for a few years, and I mentioned a friend in Bakersfield. His wife was in town, and she knew Emerson, and she was studying at Northeastern. And she said, no, you must go back. I said, well, it was 3 years ago. She said, I'm going to activate your admission. So she did. And they said,
oh, so this is 3 years later now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I made money. I saved money. I built my portfolio of work that I did. So at the end of it, long story short, I can talk forever on this, but I basically then managed to get financial aid from the university, from Emerson. I managed to save up some money, and then I took some from my parents. So it was a 1/3 ratio. I don't know where the other 10% came from, but yeah. But that's how I managed to go. And Emerson, the reason I chose Emerson was I was very keen on that school because I wanted to be close to, in New York or close to New York. I had gotten to University of Wisconsin in Madison, great advertising program, but I wanted to come to New York. So, and here what would happen at Emerson is I think I didn't have school on Thursday. So every Wednesday night I'd jump on the Greyhound bus, 5 hours, and get to New York. I had friends in New York, stay with them, and I'd interview and network the whole of Thursday, and in the evening take the bus back. So, the proximity to New York City, because that's what I wanted to do. So
Okay, so and Boston's 4 hours away from New York City, depending on traffic.
Yeah, those days it was 5, but yeah, now it's closer.
Fair enough.
Buses are faster.
But you had the interesting experience where you had gone to school here and then in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I know this was several years ago, but in your experience, what was sort of the difference you saw between the two?
I think the fundamental difference I feel is the way we are taught, right? At least it used to be. And I hope it's changing, but here it's the curriculum is you have to cram it, you have to mug it, as we call. There's very little, especially in the undergraduate, which I attended, very little application. I wrote one paper. When you went to the U.S., it was mostly directed studies and application, which was interesting. It was difficult to get adjusted to it, but once you did, it was a far more fulfilling way of learning, if you ask me, because I actually took course credit because I actually created a marketing plan for the university. I actually used to do I created a recruitment drive for the university. Actually, after you graduated, I used to represent them in GRE and GMAT forums in New York because, but they were really nice to me. But the way you learn is also very different, and also you're getting exposure to different people, obviously faculty of certain, repute. I'm not saying you don't have that here, but also you get this international perspective. And mine was a global marketing communications and advertising degree, so I got that global perspective which I was looking for.
So you were obviously had come from India, people from America. What other countries were represented in that class, do you recall?
All over. My friends were German. I had them from all over at there was one point of time there was in my group there were no Americans. They were from all over the place.
Right
But they were all. Across. They had a lot of school students from Taiwan, but then language was a bit of an impediment. So they came and they did, language courses, and then finally enrolled. But I think it was a mix because also the topic was different. Also the school was very. It was a liberal arts kind of a program, right? So it did attract people from different facets and age groups also. I had senior people in my batch, which was very nice.
Sure, but then you end up on Madison Avenue, literally, at an ad agency in New York City. Is that right out of school?
So yeah, actually, I graduated. Okay, so I have to confess, I did a 2-year degree in 10.5 months. Because I did an extra course load every semester, and I did a summer, and I did winter. I did something called a directed study, and I finished my credits because I was kind of broke. So
you were motivated.
No, not the only way you can save money is through your living, right? The tuition fee is the same. It's going to be X for 1 year or 2 years. So I decided to do this accelerated program. I almost didn't have a life for a year. Actually, I did, but I managed it, and. I moved to New York as soon as I graduated, and I had the fortune of having friends there. So literally our lives were like a Seinfeld episode. So I actually had my interview suits on a friend's loft in a garbage bag. I had their key, and this is before cell phones, right? So my friend's address was on my resume. They're answering, and those days people use answering machines where you could dial in and check your messages. Right? You probably remember this, right?
Yeah.
So I had all my job offers going there, and it was hysterical. I mean, it literally was like a Seinfeld/Friends episode. I moved to New York without a job, and I got a temp job in a week. No, actually in 3 days at a smaller ad agency. But I just took it because it paid the rent. And I was actually teaching the owner how to use computers. And he was a very sweet guy. It was a small advertising agency called Kidvertisers. They were doing children's advertising. Lovely guy. And he knew,
Kidvertisers?
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
All right.
And he knew I'm recruiting, and I take time and go for my interviews, and my offers would be faxed to his personal line. So I did that for 2 weeks, and I landed up my job at Hill Holiday, which is an IPG agency. It's a large agency. Ironically, it's headquartered in Boston. But I started working in New York.
So just for the symmetry there, you went to school in Boston, moved to New York, and ended up working for a company based in Boston.
That's right.
But do you think that Emerson degree got you in the door at that agency?
I think it's a combination of. I think formalized education obviously helps. It's what you can bring to the table. It's what you have to show. I think it's a whole combination. See, I think I didn't float the fact that I actually had a master's. I said I went to Emerson because many of my colleagues and bosses, they didn't have graduate degrees.
Oh, interesting.
So, and also I was in a primarily non-international office. I was perhaps the only international person. And the New York office was very small. It was only 45 people. By the time we moved, it was 250 people. Boston obviously had a bigger cross-section. So yeah, I think it helps, but it's not the end of the thing. It's also your other stuff that you do with it, real stuff, not what kids now do to build their resume.
No, so talk about what was the ad business like back in the day on Madison Avenue. I mean, you're after the hardcore Mad Men era, right?
Yeah,
you're not doing
much after.
Yeah, I mean, you're not doing these 3 mark. Maybe you are, but
I still do that. No, I'm just kidding.
But what is life like at an ad agency back in the day?
See, it was very different. See, advertising as you see it today, internet was around. Okay, digital wasn't around, so it was still the traditional print, TV, radio. Like online was starting, and I was the most tech savvy out of those unsavvy people. That doesn't say much because I knew how to build a website. Don't ask me why, but when I was at Emerson, I built myself a little website, put my face on it, smashed from the parties.
Were you like AsadLalljee.com or something?
It was off Emerson, and I put my resume up there and had this cheesy little song out there. And it was just
it's like GeoCities or something.
And so I tell people, can you download my resume? And any person I said, it's on, can you download the resume? No, Asad, can you fax it to me? And we'll call you when we receive it. I said, okay, that's fine.
I can remember doing press releases via fax.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Do you remember telefax?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was a kid at that point, but yeah.
Okay, what is your sort of the day-to-day life like? Are you out meeting clients? I mean, what
at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, it was a mixture of, we had, so I was hired to work on one piece of business, was the Lowe's group of hotels. And it was like the brand, and there were 13 properties. And it was a very big account for the agency. And there was me and my boss, and then they hired one more person after that. And you met the client. Luckily, the main office was in New York, so we'd go for our meetings. And it's not like we were Zooming every day. That didn't exist, right? And you could go to the hotel properties for tours and meetings and all, but generally that went to the boss, and I was next in line, and I'm not pushing to go. Sure. That eventually I was going for those. But it was, you had strategies which were already approved. You were then executing. See, when you join, I was an account executive, but I managed to deliver. I was fortunate enough to deliver and noticed in the rung, and then they hired. I'm sounding terrible, but you know how to do your job. They give you more work, not more money. So we won a new piece of business called the Union Bank of Switzerland. At that point, it had merged with Swiss Bank. And
this is UBS before it was UBS.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And it was a fantastic account. And I don't know, for some reason, I used to get excited by financial services accounts. Maybe it's the Indian in me.
No one has ever said that. I get excited by financial services accounts.
But I thought it an interesting category, over hotels. It was because you're learning. See, what you'd have to do. What I'd have to do is I'd have to learn terminologies. I'd have to learn arettas. I had to pull, put. And so I would do my research. I mean, and read up on these things before I'm going and creating strategies for all these products. I mean, I don't know what private banking was. I had no money. So
Yeah, but I feel like advertising for financial services is always like esoteric and unrelated to anything. Like there's an ocean and a beach and a turtle, and then it's UBS. Like what?
no, they had the collectibles campaign, and that was one. And then there were all these other B2B kind of ads that came with it. So it was quite thought through. There was a method to the madness.
I don't doubt there's a method
Yeah.
to the madness, but it just always struck me as a bit random.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you can differentiate between a UBS and a Bank of America, that's fine. That's your job is done.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite campaign that you worked on in your time as an ad exec?
God, I had so many. But I do have a few. Actually, my one of my favorites was a pro bono piece. Actually, two of my favorites were a pro bono piece I did. So I, again, being this young, doer, I was assigned to manage the Ad Club of New York's award show, where you get in all the advertisers across agencies to send in their entries. And you also create a campaign. So we created this campaign, which was hysterical. That was the idea is, and this is about New York, right? Quintessential New York. So it says in New York, everything pales. In advertising, everything else pales in comparison. So for example, there is, New York, people keep their windows open and do things. So, and then there's a billboard, and the guy has got binoculars, and rather than look at the couple, he's looking at the ad. Or you see the Central Park lady on the Upper East Side, with her mink coat, and there's a bum on the street. And there's a newspaper on him, and she would never think of going next to it, but she bends down to see the ad.
Yeah,
so we're interesting, cheeky little entendres on advertising, on stereotypes in New York. We were in an award show, so we couldn't win any awards, but that was a lot of fun. And then part of what I thought was a really impressive campaign, which I worked on, and I actually had a lot of creative input, was the American Lung Association. And we did a lot of work, and those are the kind of work even your teams want to work on.
It's like anti-smoking or tobacco stuff?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
This is where I see it.
Yeah. But now it's gone to another. I
can't go to a movie here
Yeah,
without
yeah.
seeing the woman who had oral cancer and died, and
No, but those were a little more, finessed.
Okay.
Yeah, they were lovely. I actually have a whole portfolio. I was going to go look through it before coming, just to give myself a refresher because it's been such a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, those two were my favorites at that point. But then, as your career progresses, things change, technology happens, and my last account was Verizon Wireless. Can you hear me now? Yeah, I don't know if you know that campaign.
Yeah,
yes.
The dude with the glasses and
people thought I was him at some point in time because I had the rounder glasses, and at that time I had more hair. But that was
really you, the Verizon?
No, it wasn't.
No,
me.
not you,
Yeah.
but that campaign was your
Not me, but I headed the B2B business for Verizon Wireless. So I worked on, towards the end of the last 5 years of my New York career was at McCann, where we worked on this, and we did some fantastic work. We were shooting in LA every month, $1 million commercial. The talent you get to work with, because they have deep pockets, and so.
I always had T-Mobile in the U.S., but anyways,
Oh,
that's
really?
neither here nor there. Okay, so 14 years on Madison Avenue in New York, and earlier in our conversation, I noted that you said, well, there's this perception that if you go to the United States, you're never coming back.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Mhm.
So what happened after, in year 13, year 14, that shifted and you decided to come to Mumbai?
There's a couple of things. One is a lot of my friends, and it's not that I made friends in New York just because, and this happens a lot with cultures, right? You generally hang with the people you come in. I was very clear in Paris, I said, I don't hang out with Indians. I've come here to meet new people, and I made that not in a bad way, because that's how you're going to learn. You learn from experiencing other people's cultures. But I had my friends from Bombay, all of us people who I stayed with when I needed to crash when my suit was in their loft. A lot of people were coming back. This was this whole wave, and expat packages were there, so they're all bankers and nicely placed. And we were, it was quite exciting to see what was happening in India. India had this surge of opportunity, but that's not the reason I came. I said it was lovely to come and watch and go back, but. I came for family reasons. My mother and my parents weren't well, and my mother had just passed, and my father wasn't doing too well. So we came for 3 to 5 years. It was understood we come for 1 to 3. 1 became 3, 3 became 5. Now it's 11 years.
You wouldn't believe how much I hear
Yeah.
that from people. That
Yeah.
it was supposed to be 6 months, 1 year, and then.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, the grass is always green on the other side, right? And Bombay, I mean, I keep saying Bombay, but you know, I get into trouble for that. But you know, it's an interesting place. There's opportunity, and as long as you have the opportunity, you're doing interesting stuff. I mean, you know, I can do countless comparisons between Bombay and New York.
I think
You've heard that before?
that's a pretty common one, right? Mumbai is the New York
Yeah.
of India.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about Avid Learning a little bit because, and it makes sense to me now that I know that you're an ad guy and a marketing guy first and foremost, because you, in a good way, are one of like the most prolific emailers. I get something from you daily almost.
Spammer? Is that the word you're looking for?
But it's not spam because I think you said earlier you're doing 270 programs a year or something.
Yeah.
Like it's always something new, and I can't figure out how in the world do you balance all of this?
I don't sleep. I'm
Right?
just kidding.
I don't. Seriously, I was just looking at the calendar, you know, before I came in, and it's literally like every other day there's something else. There's the cultural cities thing that's going on. There was something with like the Sassoons. You just did a big thing at the Royal Opera House. Like how did you turn this continuing education entity into a cultural powerhouse?
To be honest, I don't know.
Huh.
So, you know, I don't come from the arts background. See, I'm a consumer.
Right.
I'm not an academic. I don't claim to be I like think of myself as a cultural producer. And another analogy I'd like to say is I marketed telecommunications with Verizon. I market arts and culture. I mean, the principles in marketing, fundamentals are all the same. It's how you segment and that's one aspect of it. But there's also the heart aspect of it, right? So I do things I am interested in. To be honest, as people say, why didn't you do talks on religion and politics? I'm not interested in that personally, right? So what I'm interested in, I pursue, and we created these verticals and we program. And the idea is, you know, as you grow, you take your audience with you. So you do a 101 and then you do a 2.0. And I have one fundamental problem. I can't say no to people, which my team kicks me under the table when we are meeting because I say, yes, okay, we'll do it. And
Hey, you came here.
That's true. I was thinking of saying no, no, I'm just kidding. But no, it's just, it's also, you know, you learn as you go, you see how the market is reacting, you see what people want, you talk to people. I always, you know, when the Opera House was open, or, you know, I did a lot of workshops at the SR House, and I go and talk to people. I say, hey, what do you think of it? Tell me, honestly, if you thought it was bad, tell me if it sucks. Just now I had this whole email rapate with somebody who's accused me of not being gender sensitive. I mean, like, seriously, just because my panel at the moment has only men on it, it's just one in about 100, like 300, but the woman I'd invited, like, unfortunately could not join. And, but you know, so you have all sorts of permutations you work with. But for me, I like to, you know, present people who don't have the opportunity to be presented before. Because this is what happens also. There's a lot of sessions, there are programs, the same people you'll see. It's the circuit party, as I call it.
Absolutely.
So my whole thing is, let's give, and that's what you talked about, the cultural capitals. It's the idea of looking at what these younger people are doing and how they're moving the envelope and how they're pushing what they're doing to put their city on the map, which I think is very fascinating. Because, you know, you hear of, and, you know, and when I do it in these bigger cities, I mean, I tell the gatekeepers of the city, they're all friends of mine. I mean, guys, I'm doing this, give me names. I'm not putting you're too old. You know, I want the young people who are doing interesting work on it. So that's one way we curate. The other thing is also you come up with interesting ways of, I mean, I'm obsessed by Bombay. So we've done many series of Bombay. I've got many interesting programs coming up now. So yeah, and it just keeps growing. I come up with a topic and then I just, see, everyone has ideas. If you can execute, that's what the thing is.
Well, yeah, that's just it, right?
Yeah.
Ideas are cheap.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about culture. I know you said you're a cultural producer and a curator, but still, given Avid Learning's widespread influence, I suppose, for you, like with this cultural cities series, for example, what makes a city a cultural city? Because it's not like Hampi. Like, to me, Hampi is a cultural city because it's like this old history.
But that's built heritage, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What are you looking
See, I mean, there's built heritage and there's living heritage, right? So take a city. You know, you can go to a city like Jaipur, which is beautiful. It's got the palaces, it's got this, but it's also got the festivals. It's got the art, it's got the pottery, it's got the fabric. So that's also culture, right? It's got the music. So the thing is, it's not to differentiate between the two. It's also to see what, now see, everybody knows Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Jaipur. These are all, ticked off the box. It'll be on every international tourist map. But there are smaller cities like Hyderabad or Kohima in Nagaland. I mean, these are fantastically rich cultural cities. There's some people really pushing. There's the Hornbill Festival out there. There's small music festivals that people, food is culture, according to me. There's people doing some amazing stuff in food, theater, music, art. So I find those also very interesting. We've been very fortunate in lockdown. When we pivoted online in April of 2020, we had access to the best talent because everyone was in this bit of a lull. I didn't know what was happening. And what I say is, nothing changed really. Technology is not new. Zoom wasn't invented for the lockdown. Zoom existed. You're just using it. We started using the Miro board. That wasn't invented for the pandemic. It existed. Collaboration happened. It happened before. People just started doing more of it, and people started getting more and more comfortable. Where now you try say, if you actually, and I'm sure this happens to you, say, hey, let's set up a call. Okay, I'll send you a Zoom link. I mean, can we just do a phone call? But Zoom has become so much part of everyone's daily habit.
Hey, I got to tell you, I was on a telephone conference call last week, and it's the first time I've done that in 2 years.
Yeah.
And when I got the link, I was like, oh God, I got to pick up the phone and do an access code.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah.
And
you don't know who you're talking to. You can't see them.
Right?
Yeah. In their PJs sitting down there, yeah.
Or at least a name, right? I can check everyone who's online. Okay, so you guys pivoted online, obviously.
Yeah.
But you've got to be excited that the return of people is coming.
Of course.
Because you can't replicate that.
100%. See, also for certain genres, for the performing arts, like, at the Opera House, I did not do even one online music performance because I think music has to be experienced. And I've done talks, I've done some recorded sessions, but I'm not doing an online concert. It has a place for someone else and not for me. I mean, for me, Opera House only survives if you're sitting on that seat. If bum's on that seat, I survive. Otherwise, it doesn't work. But that said, I'm excited, to get people back in a safe way. And right now, the norm is 50. In fact, we started in December. We had 2 programs at the Opera House. And then, we took a break for the holidays, and then, what happened. But now everything is opening up. We've just planned our first live event is going to be on the 31st of March. I'm sure something else will sneak up before, but we did do a live one in October. We launched this kids book at the Children's Museum at the CSMBS. But I'm excited about the live.
What's the event on March 31?
It's two photography book. Actually, not photography. There's one architect and one photographer. It's books on Bombay, and it's looking at Bombay, which is my thing, which I love, and it's going to be quite special. I mean, we have lots of special things, but that is going to be. So I decided let's make that one because photography also online is wonderful. It's a photography book. You need to. People need to flip through the pages and hopefully buy it and support. That may not happen, but yeah.
But are you going to bring back and you have to forgive my ignorance on this, but stage performances or theater
but
traditional theater?
Theater has started. See, Opera House is a venue for hire, right?
Okay.
It's primarily a commercial venue. So we are having theater performances. We had it last year. We have one on the 24th of Feb. So that will happen. We are going to, as things are safe and doable and everyone's comfortable. See, just saying that I'm going to have it doesn't mean people are going to come running, right? And when you're running at 50% capacity, it sometimes is not financially viable to put on the Opera House, to put on the air conditioning because you're not even going to cover it with ticket sales. So as things become safe, it becomes doable, as people are comfortable going out there. We'll pivot more offline. Till then, but I'm not giving up my offline because I really feel that So, for example, last week, our museum, the Chhatrapati Shivaji Vastu Sangrahalaya, it's a bit of a handful. It's called the CSMBS. It's a spectacular venue. Had this major restoration project.
Yeah, they were renovating forever. It seems like.
Not forever. Actually, very little time. they did a study forever. You see that talk, it's fantastic. So I
Okay.
actually got the conservation
I went down there
architect.
to go in there, and they're like, nah, there's nothing in here. It's
Yeah,
closed.
it's closed because they were renovating.
Yeah.
You come with me, I'll take you for.
Ah.
I'll invite you. We're going to go to another. So I had the privilege of going for this before this talk, for going for a walkthrough with Vikas Zilavri, the conservation architect who did that, and it is stunning the work that he's done, and that place is just beautiful.
Is that
So
scaffolding down now off the front?
not yet, not yet, because it's it's an 11 that from down to floor it's 11-story high.
Okay.
So they have to restore it, and in the talk he talks about how this process is being. You take a 100-year-old building and you're going to restore it because it's a centenary, right? So we did this talk called the Centenary Unveiling, and we had 575 people who attended from all around the world.
Cool.
Now, in the real world, where am I going to get 575 people to come and attend a talk at 6 in the evening? So, not saying that one substitutes the other, but I think a hybrid mix of both is the way to go, at least in the interim.
That's interesting.
Until the meta world takes over. I'm just kidding.
No, I don't like hybrids. I like one or the otother. To me, there's two. I don't know. To me, it feels like the worst of both worlds doing hybrid. Because I'm never sure if I'm online. I can't always hear everything that's going
that
on.
way. Not hybrid, like you're getting a simulcast.
Yeah.
Hybrid means I'm going to do physical events and I'm going to do
Oh,
offline events.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We've
but I won't
experimented
do
with there's 20 people in a room and there's 100 people online.
No, that I won't do simultaneously. I'll tell you why. Because then people who are in the room lose the incentive to come. So what I was trying to do is record and then push it out. So what we used to do previously was the same, right? You record all your sessions and then you push it out on YouTube, which is the other version of hybrid. But people who've taken the trouble to come have experienced it firsthand. They've had the opportunity to ask questions. People who just want to see the presentations or the leg dems, you just watch it.
Yeah, there's something about that intimacy.
Yeah.
I do want to. I don't want to take too much of your time, but on the Royal Opera House, I'm curious as a curator and executive responsible with this cultural heritage site.
Right.
You mentioned it's a commercial space now. Yeah. Do you say no to people if you don't think it's a good fit for that venue, or would you do a political rally there?
Can I claim the fifth?
Yeah,
no, just kidding.
Maybe that's not a fair question. But what I'm getting at is,
I know where you're going.
It's more than just a space.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a tricky answer, but I'll give you the best I can. See, the Royal Opera House is privately owned, privately funded. So there are no interferences from anybody. Okay. No one can tell. It's this wonderful family who've owned it since the 1950s. It's the royal family of Gondal. And the erstwhile Maharaja just passed away last week. And he and his wife decided to restore it out of their own money. No ulterior motives or anything. Restore and give it back to the city. And they hired me just a few months before it opened. And the idea was to make it part of Bombay's cultural fabric again, which it used to be. So it is very elitist in looks. It's the Royal Opera House. It's velvet and gold everywhere. But to get people from different eco-social backgrounds and languages in is what I was doing. And just because we're the Royal Opera House, it's not that I'm going to play stuffy Western classical music and maybe some highbrow stuff. It is a place for experiment, it's a place for debate, it's a place for discourse, dance, dialogue. And we actually had the most fantastic programming, and it's also a collaborative space. The idea, I don't say no to people, which is my problem.
Okay.
But what I come in and do, say, I want to do this, okay, but then I kind of add value that maybe, we do this. So for example, we had a book, it was called Clouds. And just a book called Clouds would be kind of, flat. And it's a very good author and thing. So I actually dimensionalized it by incorporating 12 pieces of cloud-based art. Which I borrowed from galleries, and we actually got musicians to come and perform songs in English, Gujarati, and Odia, which were themed around clouds.
Oh, cool.
Rain. So, you take a topic, you take something, and you make it a little bigger. We've had so many kids, we've done so many programs for the visually impaired, we've got them in. So I actually hosted this visually impaired orchestra from the UK called Antardishti. And I thought it was so fantastic that, they are doing this. So what I did was I invited all the visually impaired schools to send their children in, sat them downstairs. All the well-heeled audiences were made to walk up one flight. They weren't very happy. And so the kids can also see, right? No, that's a bad analogy. They can also know that, the sky is kind of the limit. And what we did was we paired it with Braille art.
Oh,
And there's another
what is Braille art?
So basically, it's the artwork is created into Braille, so the kids can kind of feel it through.
Is it in the letters, or is it just like the texture? Like this
It's
is a
the
mountain
textures.
or
It's
something?
the textures,
Interesting.
yeah.
Huh.
And then there's also a Braille magazine, which we got incorporated. So I do these weird pop-ups. So for example, I had an opera season. Now opera is, I mean, no offense, none of us have grown up listening to opera, right? So we're at the opera house, we have to have opera. So I took it upon myself to teach people about opera and learn simultaneously. So we started doing opera appreciation workshops. We did 101, 2.2, and then we had a whole opera season. And it was an opera appreciation, and then we did an opera walkthrough. And I mean, you know, you do the different ways of people. And then to just add some fun to it, I just did an opera fashion pop-up. So I put 12 mannequins all around the opera house wearing these over-the-top clothes that no one would wear otherwise. No, I can't say that on camera. But, you know, the idea is you have to make things interesting and appealing and twist it a little to make it relevant for this time. Because, you know, everyone's time poor. I mean, think of it. I mean, if you had to leave at 6 o'clock to go somewhere right now, you'll be thinking, like, you know, could I? You know, you have to make it interesting, attractive, and also exciting for people to do.
Yeah, not only am I time poor, I got to put up with traffic.
Yeah,
Right.
true.
I think this is one thing about the Zoom calls too. Is
Yeah.
Anyways,
No, that's true.
I want to sort of wrap things up, but since you're a cultural expert now, I got a cultural question and presentation for you.
Oh, joy.
So, this
Huh.
this is a shawl, and pre-COVID,
Right.
I'd go to a lot of events,
Right.
and
they're
everywhere
great.
I go,
Yeah.
I get a shawl. I've
Okay.
probably got 30 of these,
Okay.
and I want to understand what is it about the shawl.
I think, you know, it's a symbol of Indian hospitality, respect. It's gender neutral. You can give it to a woman or a man.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's also showing the artisanal qualities of the state or the place you're in. So different places have different weaves, different textures, different patterns. And some people use it as a sign of respect. Or you're keeping people warm in the cold, balmy air.
Well, then, as a sign of respect, I'm going to reverse the roles and
Okay.
show you our hospitality. I'll
Alright,
give you
okay.
this shawl.
Thank you. Do I get up? Oh, thank
There
you.
you go.
Oh, wonderful.
All right.
Thank you. Do I sit with it or can I?
You're fine. You do whatever you want with it.
Well, that's very kind
that's
of you.
for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not needed, but thank you. I should be warm in the.
Right? Well, that's a sign of our respect and hospitality for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Thank
Pleasure.
you for telling your story. Is it avidlearning.org or .com?
It's .in.
.in.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Sorry.
avidlearning.in. Avid Learning. Asad Lalljee, thank you for being here today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, Nick. Lovely chatting with you.
That's it
Thanks,
for
guys.
today.